Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today will be an interesting one. Everybody loves a good puzzle, and I'm one of those people as well. And this reel was sent in by John. John is in Maryland, and he said he got this reel in pieces. Doesn't quite understand all of it, but it's not retrieving line. So when you turn it, it's got the line gears moving, but the spool is not. And well, he said, see what I can do to help him out, and I will. Well, we've got some screws in the wrong place. This screw belongs over here, but that's okay. That's not the cause of why this thing is not retrieving. I don't know what the cause is, but I know it's not that. And well, we'll see what we can do. We're going to take this reel apart. We're going to take a look and inspect all the pieces and parts. We're going to look against the schematic, which is one of the things that John provided me, and well, we'll see what's out of place. Something has got to be out of place. So I'm not familiar with the reel, but I'm familiar enough with the setup, and a quick look at the schematic sort of confirms what the mechanicals are behind it, and well, we're going to see where we go with that. Well, if you enjoy the art of reel repair, if you like to see how they come together, come apart, if you like to do diagnosis like this, try and figure out what's wrong with the reel and try and correct it. Maybe you're accustomed to picking up reels in flea markets and things like that, and they're always broken, and it just gets your curiosity in terms of how to put it back, give it a second chance. Well, this is the channel for you. And if you enjoy that, I would encourage you to subscribe, and if you do subscribe, please use the notification button. You'll see all the types of videos that I post, and well, you'll be able to make a decision as to whether that's one that you want to see. All right, well, we just took off the star adjuster, and then there's a series of washers underneath that and a click ratchet. I'm just going to hold those together. Now, the good thing is I can put them into a cap, and then I put my pieces and parts into a tray that I use to help me when it comes time to reinstall. There's a very small, thin washer here. And one of the things I encourage folks to do is, if you don't know the reel, then one of the first things I suggest is that you get the schematic, which is what is done here. And the second one I suggest is to go ahead and take pictures along the way as you remove the pieces and parts. Those pictures may become invaluable when it comes time to reinstall, because, well, trusting our memory, just sometimes it shouldn't be trusted. I believe if I pull this out, I can rotate the side cap here. That's going to enable me to remove the side plate. There's a bearing under there, and the spool, and there's a bearing on the spool. So one of the things I like to do is kind of take them apart and service those pieces that I can service right away. So you want to just oil those bearings, and then we can set that assembly into the parts tray. I wanted to take that off because sometimes you're going to find that there is a screw underneath here that must be removed in order for you to service the reel. And in this case, there is no screw there. One of the side plate screws is missing. That's the one that was in the handle. We're going to take it that the other two screws are what's holding on the case, since I do not see any other screws there. So let's go ahead and take these two out. That's a smaller screw. I keep a variety of screwdrivers on my table. That way I don't have to put the reel down too frequently. And if I can keep them here, well, it keeps me going and keeps in sync. And I don't have to shut off the video all that much to tell you that I got to go find a tool. Occasionally I do. I mean, there's oddball tools that happen every now and then that just, well, I just don't use them. It doesn't make any sense to leave them on the table, and then all of a sudden you find out you need it. That's understood. The other day I was working on a reel and I needed a nut driver, and I don't keep my nut drivers close by. Those two are out, and I see that that's going to release the case because I've got pressure on it right now holding it tight. But once I take the pressure off, you can see that the case is going to separate. Next up then, we want to remove the side plate, and something's sticking here. It shouldn't. You just want to be careful with this. It's just sticky. There we go. All right, so our not quite sure what's going on here. This shouldn't be tight like this. My guess is right there, whatever this is probably the cause, because you shouldn't have a stuck pinion gear in here. What that means is that when you're going to move the spool in and out, this one's not moving. Well, we're going to have to pull out some of these things. See if I can get that out. That's the issue in a nutshell. There is this pinion gear is locked in, and this needs to move in and out in order to work. Well, I can't go further at this point. What I need to do is saturate that with some penetrating oil and come back to it. So that's what our plan is at the moment. So we're going to turn the camera off. We'll saturate this. We'll try and bring it back, and then see what we can do to keep moving along with the reel. Okay, so I saturated this with the penetrating oil. I've been working it back and forth several iterations. I don't want to make it appear any easier than it is, but it took a little bit of time, and I'm starting to work it out by hand, and now we're out. So we can see that there's rust on here that was holding this whole thing in, and well, that's usually a sign that the reel will freeze up like that and you won't get what you need to get done there in terms of it moving in and out. We need to have that going, and if the odd thing is the free spool release seemed to be working, but I don't understand exactly. All right, I'm going to clean the rust off of that, and then we should have a bearing under here. I'm going to see if we can remove the bearing. Usually Daiwa puts these little silly clips in here. They're annoying to me. They do hold the bearing in place, and you got to watch it because they're real easy to shoot. Here's a micro screwdriver here. If there's one part that I tend to lose an awful lot of, other than some C-clips occasionally, it's this darn retention clip that Daiwa uses to hold in the bearings. I'll put that in my tray so I don't lose that, and we should be able to poke this through now. Not sure if I'm going to be able to get that out. I hope I am. Well, this has been a little bit of a journey. What we figured out was that the bearing was broken. And of course, that's not something that typically you're going to have. You need to find that. And let's go through how I did it first to get that bearing out. Then I'll tell you where to get the bearing. So this bearing was lodged in a little cavity here. You saw that we had to take that little clip out. And this tool, which is part of a Harbor Freight's pick package, if you will, seems to work the best for bearings. That bearing has a lip, or the housing has a lip here, and typically what you can do is you can get the tip of, or the point of this behind the bearing, and because the housing has some give to it, you can pull up and it will kind of use that as the lever. I found that's always been my go-to tool when I get bearings that are stuck. All right. This bearing is shot, right? Well, one of the things that John did was he gave me that schematic, and that proves to be very important because that part, when I looked at the schematic, is part number 50. It has a Daiwa part number of G466201, and it's the ball bearing, okay? Well, I went to some of the standard sites for Daiwa parts, e-replacement parts, Southwestern parts, and that. No luck. The out of stock. Right? Which usually means that the reel is an older reel. Well, there's a seller on eBay I can't say enough about. I've used them a lot. I deal with Pedro, and the site is HPR Bearings. And if you put HPR Bearing as the seller in the eBay search, it'll bring you up to the store. And if you're looking for one in particular, they got lots and lots of listings. If you're looking for one in particular and you want to cut to the chase, just send Pedro a note and ask him, do you have the part number? And if you don't have the part number, if you have the dimensions of the bearing, that helps as well. and he'll be more than happy to reply. I got a reply back in about 2 minutes from him, which is just outstanding. I'm not going to say you're going to get 2 minutes back in your reply, but he's very good. And the good news is they had the part, and well, that'll be on its way. So let's continue this as though it's a full service, and we'll come back to that. And if you have this reel, you'll learn how to service it, and we'll talk a little bit about what needs to be done next. But what we want to do here is to grab the gears off of here. Remember, this is the setup here. We told you to take the pictures along the way, right? So you had a bearing, and then you have this sleeve. Let's take those off. And then you can pull your main gear assembly out. And then this is the drive wheel for your worm gear. Now you don't have to remove the worm gear. You do need to make sure it's clean. And one of the things that you want to do in order to make it clean is to remove the 2 screws that go on each side. Well, I'm going to invest the time now to clean up the rest of the reel. One, because some of you have turned this on and think it's you want to see the full service of the reel, and it's unfair to stop it because we're going to wait for a bearing. So we're just going to do it that way. And the second one, when that bearing comes in, all I have to do is poke the bearing into the side plate, and this reel will be ready to go fishing again. Well, there's 2 small screws that are holding this guard in. That's the next thing we want to do. And I'm using a micro driver to take those 2 screws out. When I take them out, I want to lay them on my table because I want to make sure those 2 screws are the same size. You'd be surprised. You go to assume that they're the same size, and then, well, they're not the same size sometimes. In this case, they both are the same size, so I will take them, put them into a corner of my tray, and then we'll move on. I find this curious. I think that's probably the second error. I was told that the thing was partially disassembled. I get it. I believe that these springs go on the other side of it. It's impossible to see how that pinion yoke, this one, which fell out when we were taking it off, can possibly work like that. It has to be underneath the springs, not above it, in my understanding. But you can always confirm that by going to the schematic, looking for that setup. Once you remove those 2 screws, you need to remove this guide bar. So get a pick, push it through. It'll start to come out the other side, and then you can remove that guide bar. I'll leave that right on the table here because we're not going far with that. Then your piece is going to come out, your little bezel. And now we want to do 2 things. We can remove the line guide assembly. And when I service the reels, I typically take the reels completely apart and inspect the pieces and parts that are in there before I go much further. All right, well, there's a little cap, a little shim washer goes inside the cap. And I'm just doing this to get the pawl out, or at least disengage the pawl from the worm gear. And then we have an E-clip over here that we want to take out as well. And these are the ones you got to watch. They shoot. I use a small micro driver to kind of put the pressure on it to move it out. Try to cover it with my fingers so that I don't lose it. And then I put it in a safe place. In this case, I'm going to put it right on my little logo there. Now we can remove the worm gear. We should be able to remove the worm gear. Looks like the pole still hasn't come out here. Don't pull anything. You're going to ruin the worm gear if you pull it with the pole engaged. There we go. And you can see another issue that we have here. This pole is completely dirty and grimed up, and that can't be working effectively. That has nothing to do with the line not retrieving. Everything has to do with that frozen bearing. But I'm going to take that pole and put that in there. Actually, I'm going to put the pole in the pole cap. Put that in there. The E-clip is removed, so now we should be able to walk this out. just like that. Stand that here. Now I can get to the main shaft. The main shaft is held in by 2 small screws. This is where your pictures are going to help. If you haven't taken a picture, start taking pictures. There's little changes that go on in various models. Don't trust your judgment. For example, in this one, we have the trip mechanism is facing up on this retention plate here. You don't want to put the retention plate in upside down. Okay, we can remove that, and it's got a spring on it. And I was thinking that was a bearing, which is why we went to all of this trouble. It appears to be a bushing, but regardless. We can put this right back in. If you didn't take a picture, you wouldn't know that that spring, the location of that spring, and that could become problematic. I'm going to go right back to putting those 2 in, and we'll reset that spring. So we oiled the bushing. Many of the reels that are out there do have the bearings under there. So just check. Doesn't hurt to take it, clean it. You saw what happened when we pulled the other one out. We found out that there's some dirt on the pawl. So you should take these apart to the extent that you can. Now there's 2 pieces here. You don't need to take those levers off or anything, but it doesn't hurt to do your best to clean up as much of this as you can. Now we got to reseat the spring. There we go. Alright, so the spring is reset now. The gear plate is in. Okay, before we go too far, I noticed a little washer here that belongs as the base underneath the worm gear, so I want to make sure that that gets taken care of right away. And we can go ahead, make sure that the worm gear is clean. It is. Wipe it down if you have any issues with it. Generally, I oil worm gears rather than grease them, because I noticed that there's a lot of sediment and dirt and the like that tends to gather there, particularly if you're fishing in a saltwater environment, and grease just seems to hold that more. Before you can install the worm gear, you need to put the click ratchet back, and if you haven't noted, the click ratchet goes this way with the points coming towards you rather than away from you. There is a diagonal on this, or a rectangle. You need to make sure that the rectangle is seated on that gear post. Now we want to hook that spring around that trip lever there. And now we can put the worm gear in. A little bit of oil is all you need on this. I do not recommend that you use grease. Grease tends to trap dirt. Let's go ahead and load that back in. And then make sure that you have the set so that the portion of your worm gear there is sticking through to accept the E-clip. Okay, well, we've got an interesting set of stuff that follows here now. We have a drive that's going to drive both. It's going to come off the main gear and drive the worm gear. And yes, I did remove my glove. I took a break there. I had to catch my breath while we were trying to rebuild. That's going to go on. I'll just leave that off to the side for a moment because we want to mesh that in with the gear side plate. You want to clear the gear. Get rid of all the dirt. Check the teeth. This is a very dry reel. Check the teeth. There's no dirt or grease or debris. caught there, so we're going to go ahead and put some new grease onto the main gear. And hopefully continue to the point where all we're going to need to do is push the bearing back into the case when it arrives. Take the reel fishing. We know a couple of things visually that went wrong with this. All right, there's 3 points there. They need to mesh into your main gear. That's a visual. And turn the whole thing over and put that onto the drag stack. And I think before we do that, we want to put the pinion gear, and this thing was installed incorrectly. There's ramps here and ramps on the side here. This is a Teflon piece. It doesn't need grease. I'll put it in there. Want to get that spool gear. The spool gear is going to face the inside of the reel, which is the ramp side of this. So we want to take those 2 pieces, load this in just like that. And now we can take the gear and put the gear in. We want to merge it with the 2 pieces. We want to merge it to your worm gear like that, and your pinion gear. So this whole thing should spin now. Well, we're not spinning because of the there we go. I wanted to make sure that this is out of kilter here. All right. Nothing that the spool itself won't solve. Let's go back and grab our drag stack then. We have a drag stack that's a 6 drag washer set. So the first one in then is the round one. These got plenty of grease on them. We don't have to do anything with those. And this one has 2 sets of eared and 1 of the keyed. So we're going to put the first eared washer in. Again, it's very wet with the greases, so you don't need to do anything there. Then your round one with the key goes, and your top one. And the second, and now our cap. So that's the inside of the reel, save the springs. Let's go ahead and put the springs in. Goes that way. So when we took the reel off, the yoke was on the wrong side. I don't know how it was set, but it was on the wrong side. The springs are underneath it. That's not the way it goes. You need tension to push that in and pull that out. That's the way that the spring setup will go. All right, and then we can put the side case on. Now remember, we're going to go back and get that bearing from HPR Bearing, but right now we can't do anything more. There is a collar. We can put the collar back on. And I think what you're going to see when we put the spool in is we're going to have a turning spool. Okay, we've loaded it on. We're almost ready for the side plate. However, I just noticed when I went into my parts tray that I have these 2 small screws that we took out of the carrier for the reel case here. So let's put those back in to tie that down. And we got one on the other side. That's another advantage to me with the parts case. If I ever find out that there's a piece in there, it'll alert me immediately that I've forgotten something. All right, now we can go ahead and put the case back on. Thread that through the hole over the top. And we should just merge in nice and easy. Make sure that you have a nice firm case. This is the piece that holds the pinion gear. Locks that in. And now we should have 2 case screws here. And we'll hold the outside in. And now we have tension on that case as well because of the springs pushing properly. All right, that's one. Yep. have to find the extra one that he gave me there, because we know where that goes now. Let's get the other one out of the parts tray. Start that. So the bearing will come in, we'll reverse this, we'll take the case off, we will put the bearing in its proper place. That'll keep that pinion gear operating nice and smoothly, and we'll be able to move on from there. Alright, next up then we had a little bearing washer. And we had the bearing. And we had a series of washers that are the click side of it. And the cap here, we might as well put the cap on now. We did not put the bearing retention clip in. Another little washer that came up top here. And again, if you have any questions with this one, you just go to the schematic. It'll show you where we are with that. Now let's take the click washer. There's two, they call them tension washers. They're bowed, they're not flat. They go in the center. And I like to face them where the bellies are kind of riding up on the outside ridges. And we have the flat adjuster. And we have our star adjuster. So it's been quite a journey. There are a few mistakes along the way, but we were fortunate enough to correct them. We found the error in this reel. We were able to figure out how to correct that. I'll find out one more small screw he gave me. With any luck, that screw belongs down here. We'll put this on. We should be able to turn this and make sure that we have the spool running at this point. And Lord knows what kind of noise it's going to make. All the way back to when we oiled this thing, which seemed like an hour ago. Take our spool side. That should just snap that up now. Go back and get your through screw. Tighten it up so you can hold the case. Tighten it down. I'm just going to leave that finger tight for now just because I know I got to go back and reset this whole piece. There's one tension spring which belongs on here now. And the handle goes on. And the handle nut goes on. And we're almost getting to the end of this journey. Okay, that goes on. Again, you would tighten this down. I'm just going to leave this relatively loose for now because I know I have to go back in and do this. You want that to align with your nut cap. When aligned, it tells me that there's a little screw in here. That's the handle screw. That goes into the cap. Make sure you can see the hole where that screw has got to come together. Lock it in. Now I have the one piece in my parts tray, which is that retention clip for the bearing when it comes. Let's go ahead and put that right in that bag there so I don't lose that. And let's see what we did then. We should have a turning spool now. Oh, look at that. This reel turns pretty good without that bearing being there. You want to make sure that the trip release works. You saw all the work that went behind that. Trip release works. The spool turns backwards. When you have a bearing, this thing is really going to run nicely. So, wow, what a project, right? So we've identified what the issue was. It's a bad bearing that was frozen to the pinion gear. That just made it a mess all around. when we went to remove it, we found out it was rusted and broken, and that's why the spool wouldn't go into gear, because it wasn't releasing the pinion gear. We also noticed that there was an issue there with whoever had the reel before had misinstalled the yoke. That didn't help the situation at all. Well, I can't wait to get that bearing back from HPR Bearing. Boy, when it does, this reel is going to be ready to go. So I hope you've enjoyed that. It's been quite a trek, but we did get through it. We will finish this reel off, get this back to John, and John should have continued good fishing with it. So I hope you've enjoyed that. If you did, please like it. If you want to see more, please subscribe. To our first responders and essential personnel, thank you for everything it is that you do to keep us safe. Your efforts truly are appreciated. To everyone, good luck fishing. Take a friend. Enjoy the sport as well as the hobby of reel repair. Don't get frustrated. Sometimes these things cause you to rethink or go back and check. Do that. Don't lose your patience with reels. It'll only get you in trouble in the end. So just wish you best luck and enjoy your reel repairs and servicing. And to everybody, have a great day. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle.